All right, hello and welcome everybody to KBO Chats Live. I'm Pasco alongside Erik, Halterman. We'll be breaking down all 5 KBO games today, looking at some league standings as well, getting you everything you need to know for KBO action, Korean baseball action. Check out rotowire.com/free KBO. The link there is on the bottom where you can follow us. Stay tuned for all of our great stuff there on Twitter. Check it out. That's all the sources we'll be going over there on rotowire.com/free KBO. Let's dive right into it first with our standings breakdown. Erik, we have some unusual teams. We're not so accustomed to atop the standings. We're seeing the SSG Landers, a team that literally wasn't in the league last year because they were the SK Wyverns and they were not in the playoffs. They're sitting at first place. My Dinos are in 7th. They do have a positive run differential, I must say, but not looking too good for them right now. What are we looking at with the standings right now with some teams out of place?
Yeah, I think the main divide you would draw would be between 7th and 8th. There's a big gap there of 4 games. It really looks like the bottom 3 teams, the Eagles, Tigers, Giants, a couple of them, not the Eagles, but the other 2 did stay in the fringe of the wild card race, at least for a while last year. They didn't really add anything this year, and they were on the outside looking in last year. So no real surprise to see those 3 looking pretty much out of it. I wouldn't make much of the order of the other teams, a 2.5 game separating them this early in the season. Got still about 100 games left. Doesn't say a ton, though it is interesting that the top of the pack is 2 teams that missed the playoffs last year. Both the Landers and the Lions did add at least one notable free agent. They both poached somebody off of the Bears, Juwan Cha to the Landers and Jael O to the Lions. Those 2 haven't necessarily been the main reason why those 2 teams are where they are, as they both missed time to injury. But it's 2 teams that were at least showing some ambition, so it's nice to see them rewarded so far.
For sure. We'll see how they play out tonight as we move into all of our game breakdowns. Moving on, we first have, not the Landers, we have the Kiwoom Heroes and Kia Tigers game, 5:30 a.m. Eastern. Woojin on against Aaron Brooks. Should mention that today is game 1 for all these series, as yesterday's were canceled. Normally the series opener is on Monday, but we are getting them today on Tuesday. With Woojin on, 8 strikeouts and 5 innings pitched his last time out. No walks, pretty impressive. Are we concerned, though, with him and his lack of depth into games? He's only going 5 innings, 5 2/3 innings, not really getting past that 6th inning. Any concern there?
I would say there was concern a few starts ago, but if you look at the trend of his innings, it's pretty much pointing up. He did throw a season high in pitches in his last start. I think it was 95-ish, and it was no surprise really to see them manage his innings closely early. On was a reliever last year. He was an excellent one, 2.87. Not a 2.87 ERA, a 3.00 ERA with a 1.03 WHIP. Strikeout rate of 27.9% as a reliever last year. That strikeout rate's fallen a bit as a starter, but only down to 23.9%. So he's still one of the better strikeout arms in the league. And that's really no surprise if you look at his stuff. He has really big league velocity, 93.7 mile per hour on his fastball. Given the way the MLB is going, that's nothing special, but the fact that it would be nothing special in the MLB means it's special in KBO. Also has a slider that sits about 87.6 miles per hour on the slider. So lots of strikeouts from him, which does make him more fantasy friendly than a guy with a shaky ERA like his would normally be. But really, I think he may be better than that ERA, because if you look at his last 3 starts, 2.87 ERA over that stretch versus 6.14 over his first 4. So it's a young guy who showed something last year, started this year quite poorly, but is showing more as the season progresses. I think there's really a lot to like here.
Yeah, definitely a young arm for this Kiwoom Heroes team that should be part of their starting staff going forward. Turning our attention now to the Kia Tigers, they have Aaron Brooks, a guy who we thought maybe could be the best pitcher in the league at times last year, but having a little deja vu with him in terms of his unspectacular start the last time out. He almost exactly repeated that line from 2 starts ago. We can show it here on the site. You're looking at 6 2/3 innings pitched, 9 hits allowed, 3 earned runs, a home run allowed, and 4 strikeouts. The walks are basically the same too. In 2 straight starts now. I mean, that's solid, but nothing maybe elite level, what we would hope he would do in his next, from a year forward from last year. Are we worried about him maybe just becoming a decent, number 2-3 guy instead of really that ace level that he showed last year?
Yeah, I mean, presumably last year's version of Brooks is still in there, but he's lost to tick up his fastball this year, and it's shown in the numbers. Last year, he struck out 22.2% of opposing batters. He's lost about a third of his strikeouts this year. He's down to 14.4%. His hit totals, you see at 9-9-13 in the last three. Some of that's inflated. His 363 BABIP is going to fall, which will help his ERA. But, when you're striking out significantly below average number of batters, you're going to give up a lot of hits. So he does, he's going to have to get that velocity back or figure out a way to get whiffs with that loss of velocity if he's going to approach what he was last year. And so I don't think it's right to consider him a top tier starter until he starts getting those strikeout numbers back up.
Yeah, not looking too great for him right now. Looking now at the offenses for these two games, we got the Heroes and Tigers. Kia's 10th in runs per game. Kiwoom is 2nd, and they are on a 7-game winning streak. That is the Heroes. What are we looking at offensively? This Kiwoom team has scored 10 runs over their last 2 games. Pretty good.
Yeah, one thing to always note with the Heroes is look at all those L's next to their name. Very left-handed team, which will help them, or at least at the top of the lineup, which will help them against a righty like Brooks. One of their righties, actually, the catcher, Dongwon Park, has been on an absolute tear over his last 6 games. His OPS starts with a 2, which often means he's terrible, but in this case, it's a 2.026 OPS over the last 6 games. 5 homers. He has 1 2-homer game and another 3-homer game. He's been like a pretty good offensive catcher, but nowhere near that level. So not sure exactly what he's been up to lately, but it's clearly working for him. They also have Jung-Hoo Lee riding an 11-game hitting streak, hitting .537 over that stretch with just 2 strikeouts. So plenty of talent. They've started the year quite cold, most of their hitters, and they're all getting hot at the same time. I would expect them to settle somewhere in the middle, but it's no surprise to see them have some good offensive games when you've got a guy like Lee leading the lineup.
All right, so they're starting to heat up right now with Lee and Park's contributions. Where are we going with the pick here? The total is set at 8.5 with the Tigers actually as a slight favorite with Brooks pitching.
Yeah, I think that just doesn't factor in what Brooks looks like lately and what On looks like lately. So I am going to pick the Heroes. I guess it's technically an upset, but with the way On has been getting better as the season progresses, Brooks is pretty shaky. And I think given the gap between the lineups, like you said, Tigers last in scoring, Preston Tucker just a 732 OPS on the year. I'm wondering if he might be gone by midseason if he doesn't pick things up. Hyungwoo Choi, their veteran DH, has been out too. So that just not a lot in that lineup, whereas the Heroes, a lot of their guys are hot all at the same time. I think that's going to be enough for them to beat Brooks. And I think because I'm expecting the lineup to help with that win, I think I have to go with the over here. It's a fairly low one. Again, if Brooks is back in vintage form, the Tigers win. But it's hard for me to pick that given that he hasn't really looked close to that this season.
All right. We've got Barry here agreeing with you. On in a good form right now. We're going with the Heroes and the over 8.5 runs in this one. Moving on to the next game we have is the Hanwha Eagles and the Doosan Bears, the league losers, if you will, in that bottom half group there. The Eagles against the Bears, a pretty good group. Starting with Kim, opener with a pretty ugly ERA. No home runs allowed, but still allows runs nonetheless. Anything notable here with Kim?
The notable thing is that he seems to have the same season every year, and it's an ERA in the mid-5s and a WHIP in the 170s. Last 3 years, he's had those marks. The last 4 years ago, I think his WHIP was like 168 or something. So this is who he is, and who he is not really a starter on a good team. He hasn't been a starter for most of this year. Only one of his appearances, I believe, has been a start, and in that start, he didn't complete 3 innings. So I don't think there's any expectation he'll go particularly deep in this one, even if he's on, and he's not usually on. He does strike guys out, 25% strikeout rate on the year. If I thought he had a chance of going 5 innings, that would make him an interesting budget DFS play, but I don't think he's going to be much more than an opener. I'd be surprised if he goes more than 4. So no real interest here, no real faith in his ability to shut down the Bears.
Well, at least he's consistent. Unfortunately, he's consistently bad, as you can see here by the numbers. For more numbers like this, check out rotowire.com/free KBO. We're going over all the player cards here. You can find out all the stats and more on the sites going there on the bottom. Got to plug that. Going over the Bears side, looking at Miranda, third straight loss. A little concerning there, but I don't really know how that's happening, as he has 19 strikeouts over his last two and just five strikeouts in that span. The numbers don't seem to be pointing that he's doing anything horrible. I mean, 8 hits isn't great, but nothing crazy bad. What's going on here with Miranda?
He's got really unique stat line. All of his starts, he's given up either 4 or more earned runs or 1 or fewer. No 2s and 3s in his line. And he's got a very extreme statistical profile among pitchers with at least 30 innings this year. His strikeout rate, 31.1%, ranks first. His walk rate, 15.3%, is second worst. And that's led to a whip of 170, which is fourth worst among that same group. So he lets a lot of guys get on base, usually via the walk. He's just usually puts away enough guys to get out of it. And then in the games where he doesn't, if he has a couple walks in front of a homer, he'll give up 4, apparently.
Yes, he did have that start with 6 walks there. Concerning, but we'll have to see. We got a question here before we talk about the offenses here. Erik, let you take this one about Bay, using him as the main arm for the Eagles after Kim.
Yeah, it looks like Bay threw 76 pitches just on Sunday. So I can't see them asking him to do much in this one. I would think on 76 pitches, you probably want at least 4 days of rest, not just 2. So it probably won't be him. This might just end up being a bullpen day.
Looking like it won't be too good for the Eagles, because the Bears do rank 4th in runs per game. The offense is pretty strong, but just 3.5 runs over the last 4 games. So maybe there's a chance for the Eagles to sneak in a victory here. They are 8th, though, in runs per game. Just 1 run in their last game played. What are we thinking with these offenses?
Yeah, we'll note that Ryan Healey has shown some signs of life finally. It's been quite a while, the whole year and a half that we've been covering the KBO. They have not had a foreign hitter do anything. Jared Hoying, Barnes last year, and now Ryan Healey. But some signs of life, 2 homers in his last 5 games, 1432 OPS over that stretch. Like to see, a lot more than 5 good games from Healey, and I don't think he's single-handedly enough to send him towards the wild card race or to have a good game against Miranda, who, again, is usually pretty good. But worth shouting out him, given that the Eagles don't have very much to shout out. Although I will note their leadoff guy, Yunwan Jung, walking more than 1 out of 5 plate appearances still. I don't know if you can find walk props, but if you get the second worst walk pitcher versus the best walk batter, it seems like a lock to walk more or less every plate appearance, at least twice here. Not the most exciting part of the game, but there you go.
Hey, if you get a prop on it, that makes it that much more exciting. Looking at the standard lines here, though, we have the Eagles and Bears game, total set at 8.5, with the Bears pretty big favorites here. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, I mean, the Bears being very big favorites makes a ton of sense here. Big gap between the starting pitchers, big gap between the lineups. Not much to think about on that one, I don't think. Over-under's interesting because, again, we got one good pitcher going against a weak lineup. But I think the Bears are going to do enough damage against Kim and whoever else comes in, again, as early as like the 3rd, 4th inning. And given that Miranda is shaky, there's a chance he has one of his 4 ERA, 4 earned run games too. But I don't even think the Eagles will need to do much to hit this over.
Going over 8.5 runs and the Deucin Bears in this matchup against the Eagles. Here we go. Got the graphic on the screen right there. Moving on, we now have the LG Twins against the Lote Giants. LG has actually been falling quite a bit. 4-game losing streak and now 9th in runs per game. Looking at Sang Young Lee to stop that skid. Don't think there's much hope. Just 5 strikeouts. 5 strikeouts in 5 innings, but not really a big fantasy option with that high ERA. Thoughts on Lee?
Yeah, I mean, very, very short track record. 4.20 ERA is probably his best thing on the stat line. 153 whip is shaky. More walks than strikeouts, a walk rate of 15.5% against 14.1% walk rate. Has not thrown more than 5 innings. So we're looking at a guy who is at best a back-end starter, and I don't even think anything on his resume suggests he's that.
Yeah, not a lot of hope there for Lee. Going against Na here, who had his debut go well. 5 scoreless, 4 strikeouts, 4 hits. Hope for the league's worst team here behind Na. Maybe they get a win here behind him with that decent debut his last time out.
Maybe. Similarly tiny track record here for Na. Decent numbers in, about 10 KBO innings. But in 20 innings in the Futures League, 4.05 ERA and a 150 whip. So not a lot of faith in Na. He is an interesting one. He came into the league as a catcher. He spent a couple years as a backup catcher. All 3 elements of his career triple slash start with a 1. So you can see why they converted him to the mound. So he spent last year pitching in the Futures League and just made his debut on that side of the ball this year. Gone well, but again, tiny sample. No real reason to have much faith in him yet.
2 young guys here with not a lot of experience offensively. Lote has lost 3 of their last 10. They are 6th now runs per game. I think there was a time way back when they were an interesting offense. Now, maybe not so much, just 3.5 runs per game over their last 4. What do we think of these 2 offenses here? Maybe for an opportunity against these 2 pitchers that are unproven.
Yeah, in my DFS cheat sheet today, these are the 2 offenses I recommend stacking. 2 completely unproven pitchers. Giants are down one of their best hitters in Healey. He's out with a side injury. But their lineup is still about 6 deep of guys who are pretty good. They just have so many guys with OPS in like the 800s, but no real stars. But any of the righties in that top 6 or so, I'd be totally happy using against Lee tonight. On the other side, Roberto Ramos may be showing signs of life. 5-game hitting streak, still an OPS of just 722. He's going to have to do that for a whole lot longer, but maybe, if he gets going again, he could drive the Twins up the offensive rankings all by himself. He's that good. He's the MVP candidate when he's on. When he's off, he's very off, and he's been very off kind of all year. A lot of lefties at the top of the Twins lineup against a righty. A lot of righties in the Giants lineup against the lefties. So pretty much everything here, I think, points to runs.
A lot of runs indeed. Now looking at the total for this game, for the LG Twins Lote matchup game, it is set appropriately way up there at 11. Ramos could probably hit half of that if he's on. With that double in his last game, maybe he's turning things around, but not too much faith in him just quite yet. Where are we going to go with the pick here? Total set at 11.
Yeah, I got to go over. I mean, there's basically no level that I wouldn't pick the over. Maybe 15 or so. It's also a much more hitter-friendly park than the Twins are used to. Part of the reason why they're so far down is that they play half their games at Gemsel, which is the most pitcher-friendly park in the league. And given that, I think that's why I'm going to side with them in this one. Again, both pitchers similarly nothing. And technically the Giants have had a better lineup this year, but I think there's more talent in that Twins order, with Ramos looking better, with Hyun-Soo Kim still being one of the better hitters in the league. I have more faith in more of the Twins. But again, the pitchers are so shaky that kind of just makes it a toss-up. I mean, you don't know which of them's going to have that 4-inning 3-run game, which is fine, and which of them's going to have the 2-inning 8-run game, which could very much happen. That's a good point there, too. The much better bullpen. Twins have quite a few pitchers who are reliable. If they feel like turning this into a bullpen game and using all of them, I think they will win it.
All right, going with the LG Twins and the over 11 runs, maybe even way over that. We'll have to see with these 2 offenses. Looking pretty good right now in this matchup. Moving on to the 4th game of the slate, we got the Samsung Lions and the NC Dinos. Starting with the Lions pitcher Beck, 4 runs in 3 straight outings. So nothing crazy from him in terms of potential. Hasn't topped 5 strikeouts in any of those. 6 innings pitched once, though, or twice. Any chance we like him?
Is very much back-end starter, veteran back-end starter type, slightly below average strikeout rate, roughly average walk rate, 4.39 ERA, but probably should be higher than that, 154 whip, nothing special. Had an ERA of 5.19 last year with pretty similar peripherals. He's also lost 2 ticks on his fastball, which is down to 84.2 miles per hour this year. Not too unexpected given that he's heading into his mid-30s. Has had homer problems last couple of years. Part of that is because he pitches half the games in the league's most hitter-friendly park that the Lions play in, although the Dinos park is on the hitter-friendly side as well. He gave up 2 homers per 9 innings last year and 1.8 this year. I believe league average is right about 1. So good news for the big Dinos bats, and there are a lot of big Dinos bats.
Indeed. We'll get to the Dinos offense in just a second, but the pitcher they'll be behind is Shin, who had a nice little streak going on here for him. A young guy, 1.5 ERA in his last 23 innings pitched, a 23 strikeouts against just 8 walks over that span. I think maybe this could be the guy we talk about behind Rosinski potentially as a number 2. If he keeps us up.
In theory, it's eventually Chung Mo Koo. And
we don't know what's going to get healthy.
Right. In theory, Wes Parsons is something too. But the Dinos have needed back-end starters, and he is kind of emerging from nowhere to become one of them. Showed nothing last year. 5.79 ERA looked well-deserved. He just struck out 13.3% of opposing batters. This year, it's 21.5% strikeout rate, and the ERA has been cut more than in half, down to 2.60 with a 1.15 whip. And he's actually even better as a starter. In his 5 starts, he's allowed a total of 5 earned runs. He's also allowed 5 earned runs in 5 appearances as a reliever. So most guys do worse in the rotation, but he's been totally fine. Again, it's only 5 starts, so I don't totally have 100% faith in it, but could hardly have looked better.
Yeah, he's got that double-digit strikeout game in there as well. Should be in line for a win tonight with that Dinos offense. We were talking about their first in runs per game, but they have lost 5 of their last 6, just 10 runs scored over their last 3 games. Offensively, worry about the Dinos' recent skid, or are they going to be back in business tonight?
Yeah, I mean, they have been without Aaron Altair. He's been limited to bench duty by a minor injury. I think, was it a hamstring, something like that, his last couple games. But he's been able to appear, I believe, in both of them, which means decent chance he's back after 2 days off. There's just too much firepower there. Yuji Young, again, among the best hitters in the league, despite being a catcher in his mid-30s. He just does not slow down. Too many big bats there that unless they all go cold at once for an extended period. Suckman Park even was having a career year in his mid-30s. Too many guys that, again, all they need is 2 or 3 guys to get hot, and they're already up there with the best lineups in the league. And if most of them are hot at the same time, they lap everybody.
Yeah, we'll see what they do tonight. Samsung, though, their competition is winners of 2 of their last 3, 7 runs in their last game versus Kia. Total set for this one is set at 10.5 with the Dinos as the favorites, of course. Where are we going to go?
Yeah, definitely with the Dinos in this one. They've had the better pitcher. They have a better lineup. Lions were showing some good offense early, but really not much behind their best couple bats. I am going to go over here. Just no real faith in Beck for the Lions and a lot of faith in the Dinos lineup. Maybe I should have even more faith in Min-Hyuk Shin and think that he can, keep the Lions to 2 runs and have us be 8-2 or something. But given that his resume is basically only 5 starts long, I think there's a chance he has his first bad game too, and that helps hit the over.
All right, looking at the over 10.5 runs and the NC Dinos in this one. Moving on now to our last game on the slate. We got the SSG Landers, the league leaders, against the KT Wiz. We got Wilmer Font going for the Landers here in this one. Ugly ERA, as you can see, it's over 4.5. But he did just get his second win of the year. Quality start, if I may add. Has allowed 3 runs in 3 straight games, but has 5 or more strikeouts and has gone 6 or more innings in each of those games. So maybe a little bit more of a mixed bag here, a little bit more than just that 4.5 ERA suggests.
Yeah, I think he's actually a fair bit better than that ERA. We're still so early in the season that one bad start really inflates those numbers, and his first start was terrible. Only lasted 2 innings, gave up 4 runs. if you take that one out, he's got a 3.72 ERA and a 1.17 WHIP, and that's perfectly acceptable for one of your two foreign starters. Even with that bad start factored in, it's a 22.2% strikeout rate against an 8.9% walk rate, which again, right in line with what you want from your foreign starters. That's roughly what Drew Rudzinski produces, roughly what Daniel Mengden is producing this year. So maybe firmly in that second tier, I would say, of foreign starters. I'm not too worried about him. I think he doesn't have a particularly easy task here. The Wiz have a good lineup, but I think finally the Landers have, one foreign starter that they can actually trust to keep them in games.
Yeah, it's good for them as they were not too competitive last year as the Wyverns, looking better this year as the Landers. Facing off against the Wiz tonight and Co. For the Wiz, still has an ERA greater than 4 in his last 3 games before. He let up 6 earned runs in his last start. 6 walks on the year, which isn't too bad, but he has 7 hit batters, which I thought was a little unusual. But not too young of a guy, but 6 earned runs in his last start isn't amazing.
Yeah, well, it was his first start that wasn't a quality start, though. He's been very solid all year. One blip, I think we forgive a guy one blip. We're a little bit nervous when it was in his most recent outing. But I think there's a lot to like about Ko. He didn't pitch the last 2 seasons because of Korea's mandatory military service. It's either everyone or every male. I'm not sure. We only cover males in the KBO right now. But everybody has to I believe it's 2 years of military service. It's at least 2 seasons, unless you win an Olympic or Asian Games medal. A lot of the veterans in the league, I think, did do that roughly 15 or so years ago, so they didn't have to do it. But Ko missed 2 years. His 2 years before that, he had ERAs north of 5, but that was when the KBO still had a very juiced ball, and his underlying numbers were great. Strikeout rates around 20%, walk rates, I think, no higher than 4%. So he's always been a great control guy. He's kept that this year. As you mentioned, he's artificially deflated his walk numbers by just hitting guys if he was going to walk them. Not sure that there's much to make of that other than that's a fun bit of trivia. More hit by pitch than walks. Kind of rooting for him to keep that up all year. But if you can ignore those 7 hit by pitches, it's good control. I still think with a 3.3% walk rate, even factor those hit by pitches in, and you're still talking about 7%. So to go along with a slightly above average strikeout rate, I think there's a lot to like with this guy.
All right, that's what we're looking at for the Wiz starting pitcher here. Offense-wise, SSG has 5 straight Ws, and they're 5th in runs per game, so league right there in the middle. KT, they're 6-4 over their last 10, and they had 8 runs scored in their last game, and they're 3rd in runs per game. So this offense is strong for the Wiz, with, of course, Becco Gong right there in the middle.
Yeah, Gong no longer has batting average that starts with a 4, so shame on him. Only 394. Big slump. He's gone hitless in, I think, 2 straight games, which when your batting average is that high, I do think practically counts as a slump. The Wiz have a pretty deep lineup, too. Landers have some good bats at the top, especially after adding Shin-Soo Choo and Ju-Wen Choi. Choi is back from a hamstring strain. He's the second baseman that they got in free agency after he spent his career with the Bears. He's back on the roster, but he didn't start over the weekend. I would imagine that he's been on the team for a few days and has now had 2 straight days off. I think he'll be back in the lineup, and that definitely gives the Landers a big boost. He was incredibly hot before going down with the injury. So it's 2 lineups that should be, I think, more even than they are. If you look at the actual runs scored, Landers are close to the bottom and the Wiz are close to the top, but there's a decent amount of talent on both lineups.
All right, maybe a lot more parity in this game than meets the eye initially. It's the last one here on the slate. Total set at 9.5. Who are we leaning towards?
Yeah, I think just a little preview of our next section. Neither of these are going to be on the best bets because they're both very tight. I'm going to slightly lean Wiz, but not with really much faith behind it at all because I really do like Wilmer Font, and I think the Landers have a decent lineup. I'm going to forgive Young Pyo Ko one poor start. If you can't do that, I totally get a Landers pick here. I'm going to go under because I like both starters, although neither guy dominant and both lineups are decent. So not a ton of faith in that one either. But that's the way I'd be leaning.
All right, going with the Wiz and under 9.5. And as you mentioned, we now go to our top 3 picks from the entire slate from the 5 games. Totals or a team, where are we going to go? Top 3 picks on the entire slate.
Well, the easiest one has to be Bears over Eagles. Ariel Miranda, even though he walks the world, he also strikes out the rest of the world. And they have a much better lineup. And Bum-Soo Kim, barely even a starter, might just be a bullpen game, which you don't really want from a pitching staff that's not very good. So that's, I think, a pretty easy number 1. For number 2, I think we'll go Dinos over Lions. Better starter there for the Dinos. Even though Shin's track record is short, it's been quite good. Beck has a long track record as a back-end starter. Dinos have a great lineup. And then the third one, I think those two are a lot ahead of the rest. It's tempting to pick that Twins Giants over, as was mentioned, but it's already so high. I think I'm going to do it anyway, though, given that nothing else is jumping off the page as a very easy third one. I will mention I like the Heroes upset over the Tigers, but I'm not sure I'm more confident in it than I am in this one. But it's much more in the mix than you might expect, given that it's Aaron Brooks on the mound.
All right, going to go officially with over 11 runs in that LG Lote game as the number 3, not the Heroes upset.
Yeah, I mean, there is a world where Sung-Young Lee gets them 4 good innings and the bullpen shuts them down and they win, 7-3 or something. But I don't even know if Na's going to hold them to 7, so we'll go over there.
All right, that's what we're looking at here. We're going with the Doosan Bears as the top pick against the Hanwha Eagles. And we then have number 2, NC Dinos, and the over 11 runs. And I keep getting the graphic here. Doosan Bears, NC Dinos, and the over 11 runs in the LG Lote game. And one last look, that is the picks from all the other games. Top 3, though, Doosan, NC, and over 11 in the LG Lote game. That's all we got for you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Check out rotowire.com/free KBO for daily lineups, standings, all that and more. And follow us on Twitter for updates and everything there. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody.